Welcome to this episode of Careers Takeoff, where we learn the very latest about how careers are changing and how people can get ahead in their careers. I'm your host, Conrad Chua. This is the second of our double header about how sales and marketing are changing. Last week, we had a great session with lots of good questions, and we want that to continue. So, remember, put your questions in the comments field, whether you're watching this on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. You can start by again writing down where in the world you're watching this from today. Now, to welcome our guests, whom you'll definitely remember from last week. First, we have Julia Seri, Head of Modernization Sales at Schindler. Julia has had lots of experience in product marketing. Hi, Julia. Then we have Akshat Mathur, Global Head, Sales and Process Enablement with Deliveroo. Akshat has lots of experience in the e-commerce space. Hi, Akshat.
Hi, Conrad. Hey, everyone.
And we have Sarah Broderick. It's some exciting news. In the week since our previous episode, Sarah has changed jobs. So she's now head of customer success at Circuit. Congratulations, Sarah. Do you want to tell us a bit more about what this role is?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back. So Circuit is changing the future, or really is the future of audit. So we focus on confirmations, cash transactions, and really leveraging the ever-changing world of open banking. My role in customer success is working with our customers on the audit side as well as the provider side, so banking, law firms, et cetera, be able to make sure that inside all organizations that need to have audits, they can do it in a quick way that's streamlined, and it is always transparent as well. So customer success is really intricate in all of those components from the sales side of things, as well as marketing and recurring revenue, which we talked about last week as well.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Great to hear that. Wanted to welcome Francisco, one of our alums as well. So thanks. Good to see you, Francisco. I guess, Akshat, you're a classmate
Yes,
of Francisco.
I'm very happy to see Francisco here. He was a classmate with us. Hey, Fran. I know you can't respond back via audio, but nice to see you here.
Yeah. And we have Joan as well. I can't quite see where the flag is. It's I have a very small screen, but welcome, Joan. So last week, we talked about the bow tie model and how organizations need to think beyond just that left-hand side of the funnel and expand to the right-hand side. You, the audience, you had some great questions, and I felt there were questions at the end about organizational alignment between sales, marketing, customer success. So I thought we could talk about that first. Um, and in terms of different types of sales organizations, I lifted this from a blog site, HighPost. So one example is this assembly line model where you've got specialized teams covering different parts of the whole sales customer success journey, and they just keep handing it off, right? So I think maybe if Akshat, you wanted to start off with your views about how this works, some pros, maybe some cons, what needs to happen to make this work smoothly. And if Julia and Sarah, you wanted to chime in, with your own experiences about this, that would be great. But let's start with you, Akshat.
Sure. Thanks, Conrad. So what we see here is a type of sales organization which follows the assembly line. Now, we work with this in Deliveroo as well. And what essentially this means is the entire journey for a customer, right from the prospect stage all the way to an account stage, is handed over by specialized people who are working for their particular domain. So let's say you have people who are great at sales, like closing the deal and getting, that specialized customer in. Then we have a different skill set, which is managing customers and their expectations and being able to deliver and set them up for success. So those are the account manager side of things. So how it works is on the prospecting side, we have the sales teams who are working to find new restaurants to sign, new restaurants who would like to join Deliveroo. And then once they're set up, then they pass it over into the new customer team, which is new restaurant experience. So their job is to set new restaurants up in the first 56 days on the platform. So this is where it's an educational and training piece where a new restaurant who may not be very tech savvy, it's always good for them to have a proper handover and a proper session with someone who has the skills to be able to help them understand how an app works and how Deliveroo works and how to get more orders through the app, how to reach out to their customers, how to make sure they're displaying something which will be useful for customers to see on the app. So that's a very specialized skill set. Once they're set up on this platform, the first 56 days have gone by. They're used to using the app, getting orders, sending food to customers. Then they're passed off to an account manager who deals with the long-term relationship. So this is okay. I've already started up working on this platform. How do I take my business to the next level? I'm doing X orders right now. How do I go to 10x? So then the account managers are specialized people who work with them and set them up for even greater success. So the pros of this is that everyone can be very specialized in their role. They're working to their strengths, and it's always good to have people and roles to help a customer in their specific part of the journey, which can have different requirements. A possible con could be when sometimes a handover might happen not so smoothly, because that's the case with whenever a handover is happening. But that's something which is our job to make sure that we're efficiently optimizing.
Thanks, Akshay. It sounds very exciting, and I guess it's quite complicated for a company of the on the scale of Deliveroo that to do something like this. And I'm sure it's been well oiled. Sarah or Julia, do you have any comments about this sort of model in terms of your experience? What makes it work?
Julia, do you want to go?
I can. I'll go first, and then
Yeah.
and here in this slide we see represented some
Oh.
knowledge.
Yeah, I think Julia, you're breaking up a bit. Shall we go with Sarah first and then see if we can get you back connected?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julie, just flag in when your connection's a bit better. So on the assembly line, I think the one thing I would say, Akshat, I do when I've been working in this kind of specialized team handoff process, I completely agree. It's all about transparency, communication, and a lot of that has to do with how the teams work, what kind of processes are put in place, and then also what systems are in place. I think it's really important. I actually just got off the phone earlier with the CFO on my team, and we were talking about transparency and making sure that you have systems that actually are showing data live whenever possible. I think Akshat's going to go into this a little bit more detail when we start talking about sales enablement and how that's a growing part of many organizations to make sure that teams such as this assembly line side actually know the benefit, or they know what's going on with any deal at any point in time. And then also once they become customers on the customer side, the people who are taking it over, saying customer success, actually know what's happened historically as well. Lastly, the one other part I would bring in is that even before we get into the beginning part of the assembly line around the leads, it's really important. I think at the beginning of the slide, it talks about sales organizations. It's important to make sure that, last week we talked about inbound versus outbound. That sales development or the initial lead can actually come from either someone who's doing outbound sales and actually finding those individuals or those organizations to be able to come online, or it could be done via marketing as well. So that's where, this whole sales organization comes together. Looks like we might have
Sarah.
Julia back.
Yeah, Julia, are you all right to talk a bit about this assembly line?
Yes. Yes, I hope you can hear me well. I don't have a digital background that should support the connection, so I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, I was commenting basically that in this slide we have different. Yeah. So we have
Julia,
different specific need for each department.
Yeah, we can hear you a little bit. But Julia, I think if you I think we're having a bit of audio difficulties. So I think Julia, what you could do is if you just type what you
Yeah.
want to say in the private chat, and then I'll read it out. Is that all right? So just stay on the stream, but you can just type it in, what you want to say in the private chat, and then we can take it from there. I mean, I'll read it out for you if that's okay.
And something
Yeah.
which helps a lot sometimes is just switching off the video, because the video takes up a lot of bandwidth. So maybe if it's just audio,
Yeah, that's
might
right.
come through as well.
Okay.
Right.
So thank you very much for joining, Marco, as well as Chandravir from from India, I think. So we'll try to get Julia back on, but basically, I think Akshat and Sarah's sort of described a lot about how that this assembly line sort of work, and um,
We
the
can
kinds of
actually speak a little
things that
more
need.
on this topic, because this is a super
Yeah, go ahead.
interesting topic, where I think, Sarah, you also mentioned, in terms of, are we actually providing the right value which is required for the customers. But I mean, yes, in the future slides as well, I think this topic is super interesting for us to deep dive a bit more into this call.
Yeah, you're right in the fact of, this is interesting in the fact that you've got a handover on different processes, but
Yes.
we always have to make sure you take, you put yourself in the point of view of the customer. So what is their experience going from initially awareness about your business, and then handing over into your sales organization, and then of course handing across into the continual management side of things with customer success, and then looping back in on renewals if that's the way that your business works. There's lots of different functionalities that go into this. So yeah, you're right. We could talk about this for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course, to the people in the audience, please put your questions in the comments for our panelists, and then we can take those questions as we go along. Shall we go on to the next one? I mean, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this next one, what they call the island. So you've got individual representatives who manage leads across that entire customer journey. So I don't know who's had experience with this, whether Akshat or Sarah. And Julia, I know you can hear us. If you want to just type your answers in the chat, and then we'll take. I'll read those your views from there. So anyone wants to start?
Yeah, I can jump in. So in my previous company, which was Delivery Hero, which used to work with a lot of different food delivery brands, and still works, of course. Uh, this was a type of organization which was seen in one of our markets. So what happened there was something very different from what I mentioned in the previous slide. So one person was driving all the way from prospecting a business, let's say it's a restaurant, and they sign them up onto the platform, and then they continued with them throughout, like even till the end, as an account manager. So there was no basically difference between being a sales rep or an account manager. There was one person who was managing the end-to-end relationship. Now this worked for that particular market because it wasn't a very large market, and this system can be very hard to follow when you have a lot of customers to reach out to. But in that personalized approach, the system worked really well, because when there's not so many customers to go after, you can have that personalized attention where you're the salesperson who brought them on, and now you're maintaining that relationship. So they trust you because they joined because of you, and now going forward, you're the one who helps them grow and use the platform even more.
Yeah, it's interesting, Akshat, you mentioned that it was one particular region. I think that's where I've seen this succeed is either in specific regions that maybe are new to an organization, and you're just testing it and you're trying to understand what kind of traction could you have there. And in doing that, it's understanding, is there an overlap of another region's ICP and sales process and pain points and needs of that market? And then once you confirm that, that's when you could bring in, the assembly line once you build out that team. The other place that I've seen this work really well are very, very early stage companies that are really just starting out and trying to figure out, same thing. What is the value proposition that's being delivered by the product to the market? Who is that market, and how can you actually scale that over time?
Yeah.
So that's where I've seen it as well.
And customers love this approach, by the way, because, and that's why startups are really successful early on. And that's where they struggle to scale up, because right at the beginning, you're offering this personalized attention. There's one person who you need to talk to. Customers love that. That's why they switch from an established company to your startup.
Mm.
And then once you need to move to that assembly line model and, manage that handover efficiently, that's where a lot of startups struggle. But this model is something which customers really love, because as a restaurant or as any type of customer, I would love it if I just had to speak to one person throughout. I know them and they just help me out.
Okay. Um, Julia actually posted in our private chat. So she says that she believes this is applicable for small organizations focused on one segment or a sector, and also the need to select high-end resources for the training side of things. Um, and when it comes to a more complex business, the assembly line is probably more appropriate. And lastly, she says that this one person interface is true, though we should always bring to the customer the brand and not the person. Um, what do you guys think about that in terms of the training that's needed and the resources needed to help people in this sort of model?
In this specific role, I think Julia's spot on. You get people who maybe are very entrepreneurial. So it could be a sales leader who's coming in at an early stage company or in a new region, or a new product offering type within an existing product, a product that's fitting a particular market. So far, now you're leaping into a new area. You do have to be very careful with that person. They will find successes, but then you need someone to be able to actually institutionalize it to a certain degree, make it so that it's scalable. So you have the right models that are in place to then be able to grow that out, whatever the successes of that person were. And I think within it too, one of the biggest successes you get in this is if it's, say, like the CEO who's actually taking on this at an early stage company. That's where, or someone who's very specialized at actually launching in new markets. Most of those people, though, will always be able to zoom back out and be able to do what I mentioned a moment ago, which is actually being able to say, how did we succeed? Why did we exceed? And bring that information into the organization to be able to learn from and then be able to grow.
Cool. Akshat, any comments about this?
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to say that Julia was talking about later on this thing about, yes, customers love this because they talk to this one person who understands their whole needs, takes them through the entire journey. But actually, how do organizations make it so it's not person specific, right, or tied to that person, because that person could leave, and really you want the customer to have that affiliation to the brand and to the company.
Yeah, I agree. What Sarah mentioned earlier, this one person has to wear multiple hats. First, they're a salesperson, then they're an account manager, then they're trying to train them on how to use something. So it's not an easy job to do, and you need to be very entrepreneurial here. And as you mentioned, Conrad, if this one person has been managing the relationship with the customer throughout, if they leave, then it's really tough to hand it over to someone else. So which is why this type of model is only applicable when you have a small setup, when you don't have that many customers. But as you grow and as you move into the next stage of being a company, uh, slowly every startup realizes that they need to move to an assembly model.
Okay, cool. Um, and I think Julia, you've got a comment on this point. So if you can type that in while we while we wait for you, just wanted to acknowledge a few people who are watching us. There's Arthur Meadows, who is a longtime alum from Cambridge, and he's still here in Cambridge. Well, welcome, Arthur. Then another alum, Andreas Kitzing. So Andreas runs well, I want to say startup, but it's been around for a while and it's grown quite a bit. Sponsu in Germany that creates this marketplace between athletes and companies who want to look for athletes for sponsorship. So welcome, Andreas. And Andreas, I'm looking to you to pose some questions because I know you just recruited someone into the sales role. So I'm sure you got loads of questions there. And Timothy coming in from San Francisco. God, it's really quite early there. So thank you very much for joining us. Um, Julia, are you able to use your audio at this moment?
Yes, can you hear me?
It's really soft, Julia. If you can speak louder or try to change the volume.
Okay, I'll speak very loud, so I believe maybe you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we can hear you
I had
now.
yeah, yeah, I had a comment about how to bring the brand to the customer rather than the person. There are
Oh,
multiple of strategic initiatives which could be, first of all, with a rotational of the resources within the territory, so that the account managers or the salesperson doesn't build up a long-lasting relationship with the customer. And also, for example, the organization can decide to, for example, select some kind of outfit or visible branding that it's commonly adopted and used in order to educate the customers toward the fact that he's interfacing to a company. So there are different approaches, though it's very complex to make, because it's a soft, let's say, aspect. But there are a possibility of action that can be implemented. Mm.
all right. Well, thanks very much, Julie. I think we can
Okay.
quickly go to the next s- type of sales organization, and then we will wanted to talk a bit more about how do you structure incentives for the different types of people, because obviously that drives behavior. We're a business school, so yeah, everybody only operates on incentives here. But this next model is quite similar to that island, where instead of one person leading a customer through the entire journey, we've got small teams that have all that experience and expertise, and they're leading people across the whole journey. Does any one of you have experience doing or seeing this type of model?
Yeah, so our team today is set up similar to this, where we have cross-functional, we'll call them teams, to be able to work different markets. So depending upon how your organization is structured, our sales organization is structured so that we have people who are responsible for the actual initial engagement with one customer type. That person will see it through to the actual sale, and then there's a handover into the customer success side. So that team works really strongly together. But the thing that's important, I think, about the pods is being able to make sure that while they're cross-functional, they also are reporting to their specific teams. So say, I'll just speak for myself in the role of customer success. We have different customer success teams across each of the pods, and we do come together then on a regular basis to be able to talk about our standardized practices, our processes, communicate across our entire portfolio. And then in addition to that, share what's going on across the different regions, because there could be similarities. There might be slight differences, and we can always leverage each other's experiences to be able to deliver better processes or flag up things that could potentially be different in different markets. So I think within the pod approach, it's really important to be able to set, as I mentioned, the team itself to be able to work together and collaboratively, but also to make sure that there are organizational strategic approaches when it comes to the full customer journey. So that does have to do with potentially localization on the marketing side of things, pre-engagement, as well as during the entire process, but also standardization to go into what Julia said, which is about enforcing the brand across each of the different pods that you have.
Great. Akshat
Uh,
or Julia?
Yeah, so Sarah, in your experience, and that was a very interesting point you brought up in terms of the reporting structures that happen in this sort of setup. So, does it work with a dotted line to one of the specified functions, a specific function? So, let's say it could be the local marketing person who have a dotted line to the central marketing team, who might be in the the global marketing team, but their direct reporting is to the, let's say, the MD of that specific region or country.
Yeah, exactly. There's obviously many different ways to be able to set it up. But working across a total global organization for that one, say it's a local marketing person here in the UK, that person will have a remit to be able to handle the execution of local marketing efforts that are being done and working with the local teams that are there. So of course there will be a regional owner of that entire pod, we'll call it that. But those people do report up to the global side as well to be able to make sure there's consistency across that specific function within the pod.
Right. And the good thing about this is there's a lot of best practice sharing, because the central team can see what's happening across all the regions because they have a dotted line. So let's say if there's someone in central marketing here, they can see what's happening in Hong Kong and they can see what's happening in marketing in Australia or somewhere else, and they can share those with each other. So this campaign worked really well. It's worth trying in your market as well. And because they also work locally within the specified team that's in their market, they can tailor it to the specific region they're working in. So that's a very big pro of this approach.
Cool. Julia, do you have any comments about this approach? Hi, Julia. Do you have like any comments about this sort of approach where you have teams that work throughout, have dotted line sort of responsibilities in a matrix sort of organizations, and there's a lot more in terms of that kind of cross team sharing of best practices?
So first of all, I'm very sorry, but my computer was not working, so now I'm connected with my mobile. Hope that everybody can see me and hear
sound
me.
Great. Yeah,
yes,
you sound great.
Very good. So sorry, I was not in the conversation for the last slide, so maybe I'll take over a few comments later on in the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So I thought this is probably a good point where we can talk a bit about the kind of incentive models that that you guys have seen in different sort of sales organizations, because obviously, like in this sort of organization where there's a dotted line, being part of that pod, how are you measured, right? Who are your I won't say loyalties, but where are your priorities? Is it to a central team or to your sort of local team versus an assembly line where you measure just basically on things like getting prospects through each part of the journey? Anyone wants to talk about the sort of incentives for different parts of the organization?
Yes, maybe I can take over this one. So incentives are really powerful tool to drive the effectiveness and also operation of the teams. What I think it's really important is, first of all, to map the scope, and so what is the objective, and then based on that drive a few KPIs that could be no more than 3, because of course you cannot, if you overload people's attention with too many variables, then it would end up in a unsuccessful approach. Also, based on my experience, what I can say is that from time to time, it's hard to set some proper KPIs, because since the goal and the task are implemented by human people, the execution can somehow drag the figures. I can share with you one example, or from my previous role when I was working at Hilti. One of the core target, it was to shift or to increment sales through the web, and the market and the customer that we were interfacing were not yet, let's say, educated so that they could purchase online. It was also before the pandemic, so you can imagine. And setting some targets and KPIs and incentive, which were impacting also the salaries of the account managers on this specific aspect made them collaborate with customers in order to open up their accounts and make online orders for them. So finally, the organization was coming to a conclusion that sales were shifting towards the internet and towards the online, but that was not a proper fact. So it's really interesting to see how also when you set some KPIs and you're tracking variables, you end up maybe with some conclusion that are not correct if you don't interpret it in the proper way. So that was my experience.
Yeah, one of our faculty, Michael Kitson, he loves talking about how incentives always drive the unexpected behaviors, right?
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
So yeah, so you want to achieve your goal without changing the internal behavior that brings you to achieve the goal, right? Because you want to change how the customer purchase. So you want them to switch from purchasing in a shop to digital. You don't want to do it by yourself with the organization, right? So it's very interesting aspect.
Yeah, Akshat, did you want to say something?
Yes. So I totally agree there with Julia, right? I mean, so for us, incentives are super important, and as it is for any sales organization. But there are two main things which should always be kept in mind. First is make sure they're aligned to the company objectives. So let's imagine you have a team which is all supermen, right? And that's a good place to start. There, you've hired 10 supermen who are just, or superwomen, who are just going to do the best thing and overachieve on everything you've asked them to do. Will that look good on your final company KPIs? If that is true, then you've set the right incentives. So that's how any incentive scheme should be designed. Always assume that if they overachieve on whatever you've asked them to do, will it be good for the company? The second one is always make sure there's no way to game the system. And I think you brought this point a little bit in your in what you mentioned, Julia. The salespeople are rational actors, and they will seek to incentivize their incentives, of course. So it is always important to make sure they are set in the right way, so that there's no buffering of any deals which you might be closing this month, but which you can take over to the next month. A bit more on the first point which I mentioned on setting incentives in such a way that they're aligned with the overall company objective, and I'll explain it with an example. So let's say if we just set an incentive for salespeople to bring as many restaurants as possible, we might bring hundreds of different restaurants online, but then we might see that that's not good for the company. We just have a huge list of restaurants which are of a particular cuisine, but if you try and find a pizza place as a customer, there's just one or two. So we need that balance of different restaurants. So which is then important to break it down to the individual rep who is signing those restaurants, that you need to find a good mix and a good balance of these restaurants to sign to the platform. And that's how, if they are incentivized, then they will drive value for the company.
Great. Sarah, did you want to add in on this?
Yeah, so I think this actually brings us into a nice transition into a topic around a newer, and this isn't brand new, but a developing role that's coming into a lot of organizations, and that's called the Chief Revenue Officer. So Chief Revenue Officers, if this isn't something you're familiar with, Gartner defines it as being responsible for all revenue generation processes. And I really do mean processes, because the CRO's responsibility is to be able to make sure that across the entire organization, the commercial side of the business is working in alignment, and it's going and actually looking to achieve those strategic goals that are in place. And I think both Julia and Akshat's brought that into the conversation here by saying that, you do want to look across and make sure there's alignment across each of the different revenue related functions. And you can see in this chart here, you could have many different ways of defining the different components or the different function areas, but really just, looking back at the bow tie model we looked at earlier, the marketing side, you'll have a head of marketing generally under Chief Revenue Officer. In addition to that, a head of sales, head of customer success, and then also RevOps. I know we have Julia really on the head of sales side here, and we've got Akshat on the head of the RevOps, or in your organization, you call it sales enablement. So across that, it's the Chief Revenue Officer's responsibility to be able to actually make sure that strategic objective, so say it's in Italy, we need to make sure that we have Thai restaurants across all of the different locations that are offered by Deliveroo. Or it could be, we really do want to make sure that we're hitting more modernizations in the London office for Julia's company. The initiative is going to come down from a strategic executive level and then be communicated down to the rest of the teams to be able to get that alignment. Part of that alignment that comes into place really has to do with the incentives. So an incentive program is going to be set up with the CRO and each of the different head ofs to be able to make sure that those KPIs for each individual or for the whole revenue team is going to be similar, but then spread across the specific areas that they each own. So Julia mentioned on the marketing side, when it's inbound sales, it might be leads that are being generated as MQLs. If it's outbound sales, it could be leads that are generated as SQLs, or whatever the languages that you're using across your organization. Key KPI in the customer success side of things can be net revenue retention, upsells, et cetera, or churn rates. And then on the RevOps side, Akshat, I'll give that to you because I'm not 100% sure what all of those are, but I know you're a specialist in this area. But that's where I'd say, like, there's an opportunity within a lot of organizations today to be able to actually align all these organizations, whether it's local or it's global, under one sales leader. Or actually, I guess I'll say commercial leader instead.
Yep, all of that makes complete sense. And, making sure there's someone who is driving the revenue streams is extremely important for every organization. So I can expand a bit more on the RevOps side of things. So in terms of RevOps, the specific part which I look at very closely is enabling sales teams and making sure they're set up for success. So I mentioned this in our first chat as well, that this is very similar to how for James Bond, there's Agent Q. Now, Agent Q is the one who will provide James Bond with that exploding pen and that really nice car that has those, bullets firing from the back. But without those, he might not be able to do as good a job as he does with those tools. So it's just about making sure the teams are set up for success. They have the right tools to be able to take the right decisions and the right actions and serving the customers with those actions. So as an example, cold calling anyone via the phone is not the best way to reach them because they might be busy doing something else. But if you have something like an omni-channel setup where you can contact them via a business account using the Facebook pages or your WhatsApp pages, which are linked into Salesforce, so you can track how it's going. So that's called enabling them to use better conversion channels where a customer can respond when they are able to respond and not just answer a phone when they might be in the middle of something.
Akshat, you might have some people debating you about phone calls. A lot of work. There's this guy I listen to, Jeb Blunt, who talks about it all the time. He's like, no, just make the call.
Right.
Yeah.
Julia, do you have any experience in seeing something like this chief revenue officer model in companies that you've seen?
Yes, the well-known structure, and it's in place also in the organization where I'm working. I think it's a matter of orchestrating all the different aspects and setting a proper communication within a different function. Maybe I can deep dive a little bit more also on the marketing aspect, as I've been working for several years in the product management. So the goal for the marketing is to basically increase the market share, and this is the key measure of success of a company. And ideally, the marketing should enable sales to achieve this goal through deep understanding of the market itself, the competitor landscapes, the solution, the future trends, and also one component that it's present within the marketing, it's the internal communication. So I was used to say, or I still say, that the first customer from a marketing perspective is the sales. So if the sales buy in your proposal in terms of product pricing, placing, promotion, and everything else, then you have a great chance to succeed and leverage on the sales structure in order to finally go through our funnel and commit. I have a customer that committed to purchase the solution. I believe that, so this is a really nice chart. It's also something I would like to underline is that it's always made of people. The internal communication and how the people are engaged into the organization and how they share the value and the goal of the organization, it's important. Also, maybe linked to the KPIs topic that we're speaking about. It's of KPIs and incentive. Of course, we can set them and have certain sales incentive to bring on board sales into the mission of improving revenues. But it's also a matter of how this is done. And here I can share a personal experience. Again, when I was working in Hilti, we create some kind of championship towards a different sales team with the team names, and each month this was updated with the news shared among the organization to create engagement and fun towards this. And in the end, of course, the team that was achieving the goal was rewarded with a price that was in euros, so money rewarding, right? But through the journey of this championship, we create engagement towards the goal and the action. And yes, so I think those are also important aspects to take into consideration.
Yeah, Julia, I love what you said. I'm going to put it up here. For marketing, your first customer is sales.
Yes.
Because usually in many, well, not very successful organizations, marketing and sales hate each other or don't talk to each other, right?
Yes,
So
it feels like it feels like people perceive that objectives are completely different, but the objective is one. You want to make your organization grow, have revenue, be profitable, and have a sustainable business. So everything that marketing does is to support sales to achieve this goal in the best way.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of organizations that have recently started talking about or have been defining what is their North Star metric and trying to figure out what that is for the whole, say it's just the commercial operations or it's a global operations. Particularly in the SaaS space, you have the ability to be able to look at data that's being used, based upon use in your system. So organizations are starting to use that as a way to be able to have the North Star, and that North Star then aligns up with the different function areas too. Like it could be, say, Dropbox, and it could be the North Star is how fast a new user uploads their first 10 documents or something like that. There's some really amazing ways that people are being able to do that, to have it as like the key motivator across the groups. The other thing I read a book not too long ago called Drive by Daniel Pink. And it's fascinating if anybody's looking at motivation and intrinsic motivation in addition to incentive motivation. He talks about something which is, I think it's called Motivation 3.0, and really getting away from some of our historical ways of being able to motivate people from an incentivation perspective, and actually going into something Julia said, which is more about the team. And achieving as a team, as opposed to achieving as I think the super people, as
Yes.
Akshat mentioned earlier.
Right.
Really fascinating. So if anyone's looking for a book on that, it's a good one to pick up.
great, thanks very much. It's been such a great pleasure speaking to all three of you. We've gone from James Bond and Q to Superman, and women, and superheroes, I guess.
Superhero people.
Yeah. So it's so amazing. I'm just gonna put the link to Daniel Pink's book Drive in the comments. So thank you so much, to our panelists, and I wish all three of you, and our listeners, lots of great sales and customer success ahead. This last two episodes have really given me ideas in terms of where we could bring the discussion further, in terms of a lot of it about incentives and culture and how do you drive that. So thank you once again. Next week we have another series, and it's going to be about the video games industry. We've got an alum, Hamza Mudassir, who is going to come and talk about what is going on in this industry. And until I did some research, I had no idea that the video games industry is actually larger than any other entertainment industry out there. So this is not something to dismiss. And I have to say that looking at how much money my daughter spends on Roblox, I can encourage all parents to come and watch this because you will be scared.
And marketers.
Yes, and marketers as well. So to our listeners, thank you so much. You guys have been a great audience, and we'll see you again next week, same time, right? Where I will be talking to Hamza Mudassir. So thank you all very much.